I'm going to go back to A Short History of Benin by Jacob Ekaladerhan. So he talked about the Ogisos that they had at the time. He says, for a considerable number of years after the death of Ogiso, there was an interregnum, and the following leaders of the people, Ere, Orire, Akwa, Ekpigo, Oria, Emose, Ororo, Obioye, Arigo, Evian, and his son Ogiame, administered the republican form of government. 1 second. They administered a republican form of government. At that time, the country was known as Igodomigodo. The Oludonri of Idonri Evin was a priest and followed Oba from Hue, who afterwards posted him in charge of the god Oron at Idonri. Another tradition says that Oba met some people who were in the land before his arrival. It is to them probably that we owe our language. Similar to what H.F. Marshall said, that there are people in the land as well. Now, the coming of Prince Rànmíyàn and the opening of the second period about this date, let's just leave the date alone. I'm saying that because more details have come out since the book was published about how inconsistent the dates are, but we'll come back to that later. The administration of the Republican rulers, especially that of Evian and his son Ogiame, was unsatisfactory. Things were going from bad to worse, and the people saw that there was great need for a capable ruler. Ambassadors were therefore dispatched to Hue, Ilé Ifẹ, not something in Kogi State. Like, why are people lying? They will call anywhere else but the real place, because I know why, but I won't say it now. You just want to change your history for no reason. When you have a reason, but the reason, to be honest, is mostly political expediency in the Nigerian state. Has nothing to do with the real history, essentially. It's just someone making something up in order to look big, which is totally unnecessary. So, he's saying that they sent ambassadors to Ilé Ifẹ, by the elders. Sorry, let me just read that according to what he wrote here. Ambassadors were therefore dispatched to Ilé Ifẹ, by the elders, requesting that a wise prince be sent to be their ruler. The prayers of the people had the desired effect, and subsequently Prince Rànmíyàn was sent accompanied by courtiers, including Ogifa, a magician, and he succeeded in reaching the city after much trouble out of Via River with the ferrymen. You remember what we read the other one? The last leader, Ogiame, was much opposed to his coming. By the way, Ogiame is the son of Evian. The Ogiame still exists today in Benin, but like Ogiso, it's now a title, not just a person's name. Originally, it was the name of the son of Evian, but has become the title of all their leaders now. And you have to go back to when we discuss the Ekiopaga Treaty. Is not Yorùbá. Ekiopaga Treaty. If I'm not pronounced correctly, pardon me. You know more about how that, the role of Ogiame, the role he played in when they were trying to found Benin, and that was under Obagodo. We'll get to that later. We have a lot of later in this because the thing is plenty, but we'll get there. Let's continue. So he says here, the prayers of the people had the desired effect, and subsequently Prince Rànmíyàn was sent accompanied by courtiers, including Ogifa, a magician, and he succeeded in reaching the city after much trouble out of Via River with the ferrymen. The last leader, Ogiame, was much opposed to his coming. He gave as his reason that it was difficult to serve an Oba, Ogiamiawenaga, hence his name Ogiame. But as the need for a proper Oba was felt to be so great by the inhabitants, no need was paid to his advice. Prince Rànmíyàn took up his abode in the palace built for him at Usama by the elders, now a coronation shrine. Soon after his arrival, he married a beautiful lady, Erinwide, daughter of Ogiedo, by whom he had a son. After some years residence here, he called a meeting actually it was there for only 2 years, but details. After some years residence here, he called a meeting of the people and renounced his office, remarking that the country was a land of hatred, Ile Ibinu, by which name the country was known afterwards, and that only a child born, trained, and educated in the arts and mysteries of the land could reign over the people. He caused the son born to him by Erinwide to be made Oba. in his place and returned to his native land, Uhe, Ilé Ifẹ, leaving Ogiefa, Ihama, Oloton, and others at Benin City in charge of his son. Ogiefa had repeatedly come from Uhe, that's Ilé Ifẹ, to Benin City for the practice of medicine prior to his accompanying his master, Prince Rànmíyàn. Hence, every member of the family of Ogiefa is flattered ever since by the title of Vianreto, child of the pioneer. While Ogiefa once was dancing with drums Igede in honor of his profession, Ogiame angrily sent his son Ubi to stop him. Ubi treated Ogiefa with every indignity and cut his drum with a knife. Ogiefa, however, went to beg Ogiame to allow him to continue his practice, and a few years afterwards, Ogiefa gave his daughter Ewere in marriage to Ubi, the son of Ogiame, in order to play Ilé Ifẹ to Benin, where Elawe and the early people of Usen. Also the Oloba, who later founded the Oba near Akure, where Rànmíyàn halted on his return journey from Benin to Uhe. Akure had not then come into existence as a town. Note, Prince Rànmíyàn of Uhe, Ilé Ifẹ, the father of Eweka I, Oba of Benin, was also the father of the first Aláàfin of Oyo. Alright. All is true. Everything true. And they also mentioned Oba. Oba is the one in Ondo State now. Okay, so we have an idea, at least a rough idea. We'll go into details much later, but we have a rough idea, from those two books at least. And I told you why I read those books. Those books were written before the revision started, and it gives you an idea the connection between Yoruba people and Benin. The connection is not really with the people of both places. It's with the people of Yoruba land and with the monarchy of Benin. So it's not like, oh, Benin people are part of Yoruba people. That they are their own people. They have their own identity. But you see, the kings, they are descendants of Rànmíyàn. But even before Rànmíyàn, the story goes all the way back to Obagodo. Was also, of course, a Yoruba man from those two books. So here's a question: if the ancients believe the story, share the story, told their children, this is who we are, this is how we're connected to Yoruba people, what changed? By the way, again, I'm saying this, I know I'm saying repeatedly for a particular reason. This is not a case of Benin people are Yoruba. That's not what we are doing here. Because I don't want, because we have all these funny people that will come around making noise. Nobody is saying that here. Benin people are not Yoruba, but there are some of those who accompanied Rànmíyàn to Benin or to Usen, who are to Uselu, who still greet themselves Lawe or Lamogun in Benin today. They are part of those who moved with him when they went to Benin. They are Yoruba. So there are some leaders, some Yoruba families and the king. Those are the ones that are connected directly to Yoruba people. Not everybody in Benin. So it's important to make that very clear. Having said that, let's now go to why we are here. You'll be wondering, so what have we been doing since? We've been laying foundation. Our foundation is good enough now. Omolomo says, my in-laws. That's good, well done. Now, what we came to read today is how everything changed. So I'm going to read to you from a journal. This is a journal of the Historical Society of Nigeria. It was published in 1976. Someone says, in addition, they still keep Yoruba names. Yes, Omolomo, they still keep Yoruba names. They still greet. And Benin has this very interesting thing where they greet based on origins. So if you're from Uwe, you greet Lawe or Lamogun. Ogun, of course, is from Ife. Which is quite interesting, the way that is. Let me just quickly read some questions. White Kubo says, do you think the aborigines of Ile Bino could have been related to the hotheads across the... Nah, Jesus Christ. You just gave me bazooka. Why? Okay, only sorry, respectfully, the hot-headed people on the east bank of the Niger. Ekushe, Ekpele, Shajendake. I don't think so. I mean, the connection between them is actually quite interesting. Well, maybe we're going to get to it. The connection between Benin and Igbo people. I think that's the question you're asking. Maybe we'll get to that eventually. But let's just stick to the kings for now. Someone says all the Obas keep Yoruba names, even those unknown to the public. Yes, Ewari. I mean, this is the second, the Oba now. Oba Polopolo is Oba Ewari the second. The first one, his name is actually Ogun. See, they were not ashamed. It wasn't something to be ashamed of. That it wasn't something to be ashamed of. I mean, up until 1937, when they had the first meeting of the Yoruba Council of Chiefs, Eweka Benin was there. I don't know if you've seen that picture before we even start reading. It was something to be proud of. We're family. It's not, and that's why I'm saying that this conversation is not about, oh, somebody is bigger than the. You can't be saying they are bigger than. It's a family thing. Like, I'll look for that picture and show it to you guys. Okay, I have the picture here. The inaugural meeting of the Yoruba Council of Obas held at the Alaafin's Palace in Oyo. The Oni was appointed permanent chairman, and then they were having annual council with key rulers. I'll show you the picture. It wasn't anything to be ashamed of. It was a family affair. Up until recently, till Gowadi Nkotodai, you have the Oni at the center, you have the Alaafin, you have the Aujale, you have the Alake, you have the Oba of Benin. 1937, the first official meeting of the Yoruba Oba. Listen, by the way, I've also heard people say things like, oh no, it was Western region. There was no Western region in 1937. No, there was no Western region. There was no war in politics or anything. I was in politics, but they were still in NYM. They had nothing to do with what's going on here. It was called Yoruba Council of Obas. There's a reason Oba Benin is Oba now. It could have taken any title. It should be a title of his father's. I don't know what people think is shameful. I think it's beautiful. Like, it's just wonderful. I don't know. I mean, even my aunt, she's late now. Whenever they talk about Benin, they call it Ibini. They call it Ibini in Ife. Ibini. They talk about it like family, like Arawa. Like, it's not like it's Yoruba land, but the point is that it's still part of us. Something like that. That's the mindset about Benin. Until, of course, people started thinking that somehow it makes them feel less or anything. Let me read to you from here. Inaugural meeting of the Yoruba Council of Obas, 1937. The official first meeting of the Yoruba Obas took place at the Palace Hall of the Alaafin of Oyo. And then the people that were there, Oba Daniel Adesonya Belegua II, Aujale of Jebu, Osole Ekonbi, Aujale of Jebu, Oba Shinyobola Onikepe Oladigbolu. I hope I'm pronouncing the Onikepe very well. Oladigbolu, that's the Alaafin of Oyo at the time. Obadesoji Tadenyawo Aderemi. Right? Then there was Sir Bernard Henry Bodilion. That's the one that Bodilion Street in Okoye. It was named after him. He was the governor of Nigeria at the time. Omonoba Nedo Uku Apolopolo Akenzwa II, Oba of Benin. Oba Akenzwa that went to this Yoruba Oba meeting was the one who was on the throne of Benin when they published that book. And then lastly, Obaladapo Samalademola Alake of Egba land. So that was the inaugural meeting. Now, that meeting did not happen because there was Western region. It happened because Yoruba Obas decided to meet together. And they appointed their father as the permanent chairman. And yes, it's their father. Obaladigbolu was the Alaafin at the time. As a matter of fact, it's actually their great-grandfather, if you're really keeping it a buck. Because rànmíyàn is not able to do as son, it's his grandson. The king of Oyo is rànmíyàn's son. The king of Benin is also another rànmíyàn's son. The one in Benin is Eweka, the one in Oyo is Ajaka, and then Sango. Both of them were rànmíyàn's sons. So, in actual fact, they are great-grandchildren of Oduduwa in Ife. They made their father the permanent chairman when they met in 1937. Which is how it should be. whatever happened is primarily because of the political situation in Nigeria. That's what is making people revise history, and it's unnecessary. So let's go to what they revised now. I'm going to read from that journal I mentioned earlier. It's the Journal of the Historical Society of Nigeria. Was published December 1976. This particular entry is called The Origin of the Eweka Dynasty of Benin, a study in the use and abuse of oral traditions. G.A. Akinola. All right. Until quite recently, all the known historical traditions about the origin of the Eweka dynasty. Who is Eweka? You know Eweka from what we read. Owomika. He couldn't speak as a child. They were playing a game, Akwe, and then he won. And then he shouted, Owomika, Owomika, and they started calling him Eweka. So when you hear Eweka, they're talking about the son of Rànmíyàn, you can call him the first or the second king of Benin. You'll be right, whichever one you put it. Sorry, however you put it, but you get the point, right? Okay, so he's saying here that until quite recently, all the known historical traditions about the origin of the Eweka dynasty of Benin were unanimous in saying that the first Oba of this dynasty was a son of Rànmíyàn, a prince of Ifẹ, who came to Benin in response to the free invitation of the city's notables at a time of political instability. We know when instability happened, that was after the Ogisos era, when we had the interregnum. During the past few years, again, this was published in 1976, so when it says past few years, it's talking about what happened in the 1970s, okay? During the past few years, however, a number of other traditions have been coming to light, challenging certain aspects of the accounts contained in the received traditions. Although one may be tempted to dismiss these recent stories as new inventions, there seems to be some definite worth in analyzing them and their claims. For example, it will be useful to examine them for consistency and relate them to other bits of evidence which demonstrate either tacitly or until early in this century quite actively the links between the Ife and Benin ruling dynasties. But it ought to be pointed out that the aim of this essay is not to establish the truth of the received traditions as such and so on and so on. Let me just read. Indeed, it is doubtful whether this can ever be done in view of the absence of supporting archaeological and other documentary data. The point is that the received traditions give us an idea what the history is. What's the received tradition? What you heard from Gareva, what you heard from H.F. Marshall, that's the received tradition. In other words, it's been like that from when the place was settled. That's the story they've always told themselves. They told their children, their children's children, until it was written down. And then about 40, 50 years after they started writing these things down, people started changing the history. Discounting an 1823 story of uncertain provenance, and according to which the founder of Benin dynasty was a white man who came from the Great Water, the earliest written record of the tradition ascribing the foundation of the present Benin dynasty to an Ife prince was by Talbot, sometime in the 3rd decade of this century. That would be in the 1920s. And this is what Talbot said. According to tradition, the first king of the country was Igudu. What was Igudu? Obagodo, Obanigodo, Igudu. They're talking about the same person. According to tradition, the first king of the country was Igudu, a Yorùbá chief named Ere. Stated that the Ogeni of Ufe, in Yorùbá, Ooni of Ife, arrived with a small following but did not gain much power. His son Ogisos also made little headway and later returned to Ife. In 1300, the Ooni of Ife sent another son called Rànmíyàn, accompanied by a large following. He lived at Use for 3 years before returning to Ife. Talbot further adds that though Rànmíyàn left Benin for Ife, his son Eweka reigned in Benin and founded a dynasty. By the way, if you are interested in that one, you have to. It's another book. It's called The Peoples of Southern Nigeria by P. Henry Talbot, but maybe some other time. 8 years after Talbot's sketchy story above had been published, the first definitive account of the origins of the Eweka dynasty appeared in a history of Benin by an Edo historian, Chief J.U. Egareva. That's the one we read earlier. This account, which has become so widely accepted as to acquire the characteristics of a tradition itself, is a synthesis and analysis of several traditions recited by many informants. In a sense, it is a pity that no record of these traditions exists in the form of which they were recited. It is therefore impossible to check whether any of the traditions used by Egareva in his history is substantially different in content from the general interpretation presented by him. However, taking Egareva's history as being a synthesis of the received traditions, the circumstances surrounding the establishment of the Eweka dynasty in Benin are summarized below. Prior to the establishment of the dynasty of Obas in Benin, the city's rulers were known as the Ogiso. The first Ogiso was Igodo. Who is Igodo again? Obagodo, Obanigodo, the one who was called the eldest son of Oduduwa, according to Benin people. The first Ogiso was Igodo. But when you hear first son, sometimes even they will call him the first son because Oma found on Igara. Our first son. Most time everybody is somebody's first son, even though you're wondering how many sons does he have, how many first sons does he have. It could be first son, it could also be first son from different mothers, but you get the point. Prior to the establishment of the dynasties of Obas in Benin, the city's rulers were known as the Ogiso. The first Ogiso was Igodo, who established a dynasty of kings, some 31 in all. This dynasty came to an end when its last ruler, Ogiso Owodo, was banished from Benin as a result of popular hostility against his regime, which was marked by misrule and cruelty. His only heir, Ekaladerhan, who would have succeeded him, had earlier been exiled to Ugoton. I hope you are noticing the consistency. His only heir, Ekaladerhan, who would have succeeded him, had earlier been exiled to Ugoton, and although every attempt was made to persuade him to return to Benin after his father's banishment, Ekaladerhan refused to leave Ugoton, where he eventually died. Ugoton is not Ife. Where he eventually died. Ugoton is not Ife. There was no Ekaladerhan in Ife that was walking the streets, the bushes and the forests and just traveling. Is not true. It's a recent invention that makes absolutely no sense. But if you believe it in your place, it's good. But don't change history. God bless you. So it says here, he's only here, Ekaladerhan, who would have succeeded him. We know how he banished him. We already read about that, Abi. So let me quickly pause and say something. From what I just read now, you notice something. I think I should quickly explain. This Ogiso Owodo they're talking about is the father of Ekaladerhan. Why did this paper call Egareva's work a synthesis? Because if you read and I mentioned it earlier, if you were here, if you read the Egareva's work, it made it look like it was just one Ogiso, and then it was the one who also had Ekaladerhan, and then after him there was Ere and Oriri and so on and so forth. But in actual fact, there were many Ogisos, right? There were 31 in all, and that the last one who gave birth to Ekaladerhan is the one who had a problem with his wife not having children, and then they banished his son. But later he himself was not dealt with. Then they begged him to come back, Ekaladerhan to come back. He did not return to Benin. He died at a place called Ugoton. He did not go to Ife. He is not from Ife. He is not Oduduwa. It does not even make sense because it was a different time from Oduduwa's time. So Ogiso Igodo or Obagodo, who quote unquote was the son of Oduduwa, had other people, other successors before the one who then gave birth to Ekaladerhan. So it would not make sense to then say that it's the same person as Oduduwa. Let's go on. So he says here that although every attempt was made to persuade Ekaladerhan to return to Benin after his father's banishment, Ekaladerhan refused to leave Ugoton, where he eventually died. The people of Benin then decided to set up a republican form of government with a commoner named Evian as administrator, as a reward for the brave and meritorious service rendered by him to the community through killing a murderous beast. We mentioned that earlier as well. In his old age, Evian named his son Ogiame as his successor, and the Benin notables reacted against this by dispatching an embassy to Ife, asking the Oni to send one of his sons to Benin for things, quote unquote, for things were getting from bad to worse, and the people saw that there was need for a capable ruler. End of quote. for peace. I don't, please, this is not the place. This is not the place. I'm quoting books. I'm mentioning sources. Don't continue in the comment section. I can either mute you or just get you out. Please, if you have anything against what I'm saying, you have to also go through that rigors of at least quote something according to this, not according to what you think. I don't care what you think. I don't even know you. Thank you. Where were we? And if you notice, since we started, we've been very courteous and gentle. Let's continue like that. God bless you. In his old age, Evian named his son Ogiame as his successor, and the Benin notables reacted against this by dispatching an embassy to Ife, asking the Oni to send one of his sons to Benin. Quote, for things were getting from bad to worse, and the people saw that there was need for a capable ruler. End of quote. After the Oni of Ife had secured assurances that his son would be welcome in Benin, rànmíyàn was duly sent, accompanied by several courtiers. We already mentioned that it was the third that was sent. The first two were killed by the ferrymen who were sent by Evian. rànmíyàn had lived in Benin for only a few years when he discovered that the country was a land of vexation and that only a child born, trained, and educated in the arts and mysteries of the land could reign over the people. It's quoting Egariva. Accordingly, he had his son, Eweka, born to him in Benin by Irene with the daughter of Onoge of Ego, to be installed as Oba in his place, while he himself left Benin for Ife. Throughout his residence in Benin and during the reign of his son Eweka, as well as those of his two successors, there was no resistance against the establishment of an quote-unquote alien dynasty. It was only when Ewedo, the fourth Oba of the new dynasty, decided immediately after his coronation to remove the seat of his government from Osama to the site of the present palace that war broke out between the Oba and Ogiame's faction. We call it Ogiame today, although back in the day they used to write it as Ogiamwen. Eventually, the latter were defeated, and Ewedo was therefore able to consolidate his hold on the throne. I want to quickly read something to you before I continue. I don't know if you've heard about I've mentioned earlier, Ekaladerhan Treaty. It was the treaty that was established between the Ogiame. By the way, Ogiame had now become a title at this point. It wasn't just a name. Like I said, Ogiame originally was the son of Evian, who was the administrator of Benin after the era of the Ogisos. Ogiame had gone from being the name of a person to the title of the leaders of those people who chose not to be under the leadership of the Oba. Okay, that's why Evian resisted, the coming of Oba from Ife anyway. So I'll see if I can show you the image here. This was published in the newspaper. Oh dear, I'm going to read to you. Okay, let me show it to you so that you understand that. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We don't have all this thing of what's it saying, is it making things up, because we've been seeing people already. So there's an image that I started seeing this image years ago anyway. The memorable Ekaladerhan Treaty between Ogiame, Erebo, and Oba Eweka, it's not actually Eweka, it's supposed to be Ewedo, in 1200 AD, formally signed by Ogiame Ode and Oba Ewedo in 1255 AD, which all past Obas had complied with, and restricted by Ogiame Osarebo Okongwe on Oba Eredua in 1979, as shown in the above paragraph. This is what they're talking about. So what happened essentially was that Oba Ewedo was moving the capital from where his great-grandfather had established it outside of Benin. He was relocating it to Benin, which led to a war between himself and the Ogiame, and they had that war, and they won. The Ewedo faction won. Then they established their place, but they had a treaty with the people, and that treaty is not today's topic, but maybe another day we'll talk about it. There are specifics, the things that the Oba was supposed to do, what Benin land, where in Benin land belonged to the Oba, which one belonged to the Ogiame, all those things, the details are all in this treaty, and we have a copy of it here. We'll go back to the book we were reading earlier. Just a second. So he says here that it was only when Ewedo, the fourth Oba of the new dynasty, decided immediately after his coronation to remove the seat of his government from Usama to the site of the present palace that war broke out between the Oba and Ogiame's faction. Eventually, the latter were defeated, and Ewedo was therefore able to consolidate his hold on the throne. From the above, it can be seen that the received traditions as recorded by Talbot and Egareva are in agreement about the identity and antecedents of the first Oba of Benin, and the circumstances in which his dynasty was established. These crucial points, incidentally, are the very ones over which the new traditions take issues with the received traditions. In other words, the idea of where Eweka came from, how Ewedo got here, all those things that have to do with the dynasty is what is being questioned with this new so-called, how do you call it now, new traditions, right? As against the received traditions. And when you hear the word received, it means that this is what we got from our ancestors. They also got it from their fathers and got it from their fathers and so on and so forth. So we received it. But this one are just creating something new and is against what we've always known as the received tradition. Let's go on. This is where it gets very, very interesting. Buckle your seatbelts. We're about to fly. The present writer's attention was drawn to the first of these new traditions in 1970. A work under the title of Edo History in TypeScript by a certain S.B. Omorige. Subsequently, 3 other versions of these new traditions appeared at different times in Midwestern, now Bendel State's Sunday Observer. As is to be expected in these amateurish historical works, no attempt is made to cite the sources of information or the names of the informants. Apart from the version by Omorige referred to above, the other 3 new accounts are from Edo and Kezua, D.U. Edebiri, and Iyari. For the purposes of brevity and because of the new traditions, really, let me explain before we go into this stuff. It's saying that we've always had this story from the ancient, from the elders, from the ancestors, right? And it's, I started publishing it in the 1930s with Egareva. As a matter of fact, Talbot had written about it earlier. And then there was another colonial official who wrote about it. And then he then had Jacob Egareva wrote about it in 1934 in Edo, then published it in English language in 1936. Then you had H.F. Marshall who wrote about it and published in 1940-41. But the first time somebody wrote something to counter what we've always known was in 1970. So all this revision that you hear, it's not ancient. Excuse me, it's not ancient. It just started in 1970. And the first person who wrote something like that is S.B. Omorige. But there are 4 of them in that same period. 4 of them wrote. One was S.B. Omorige, who actually wrote a book, something like a book. The others wrote in a newspaper. Midwestern, they now call it, at the time in 1976 it was called Bendel. By the time it was Midwestern. Why? Because again, Midwest was there up until 1967, but they still had the paper. And then in the 1970s, they had changed the name to Bendel, essentially covering that side. Now, they had no references. They quoted nobody. They just wrote their own. Iyari, Edebiri, and Akenzua, plus the one by Omorige. Those 4 started giving us Lamba in 1970. That's where the Wala began. Why are we talking about this? Because somebody mentioned last week, is what happened in Oyo similar to what happened in Benin? Yes. A lot of people just change stuff as though every other person is sleeping. They are the ones that can rewrite history. You can't rewrite history when it happened not just to you but to others as well. That's the tricky thing about history. From the above, okay, we read that already. So it says here, let's start from here. The present writer's attention was drawn to the first of these new traditions in 1970. A work under the title of Edo History in TypeScript by a certain S.B. Omorige. Subsequently, 3 other versions of these new traditions appeared at different times in Midwestern, now Bendel State's Sunday Observer. As is to be expected in these amateurish historical works, no attempt is made to cite the sources of information or the names of the informants. Apart from the version by Omorige referred to above, the other 3 new accounts are from Edo and Kezua, D.U. Edebiri, and Iyari. For the purposes of brevity, and because the new traditions relate in fact two main stories. Oluwa. And because I'll tell again, for the purposes of brevity, and because the new traditions relate in fact two main stories, a discussion of their accounts will be undertaken by taking them in pairs. Beginning with the first pair, that of Omorege and Edun Akezua, we are told that when the era of the Ogisos ended, and Ogiame had succeeded his father Evian, the commoner who had become ruler after the banishment of Ogiso, the Benin notables indeed had a prince from Ife in Yorùbá land. But Omorege identifies this prince with Ekaladerhan, the only son of Ogiso, who had been exiled to Ugoton on his father's orders. Ekaladerhan eventually fled from Ugoton and wandered into the forest until he came to Ife, where he settled under the name of Omonoyan. Please pay attention. No? You see how warped this thinking is, but just stay with me. His popular nickname is Omonoyan. At the court of the Oni, Ekaladerhan was accepted as a prince and his name corrupted into rànmíyàn. Years afterwards, there came a delegation from Benin to, I'll explain. There came a delegation from Benin to bring Ekaladerhan back to the city. Permission for this was granted, and Ekaladerhan, alias Omonoyan, alias rànmíyàn, went to Benin, accompanied. I don't know who you are, but you're a bad person. I see what you wrote in the comment section. Let me go back to what I'm reading. Ekaladerhan, alias Omonoyan, alias rànmíyàn, went to Benin accompanied by a number of Yoruba dignitaries. What did you just hear? Let me tell you, let me just bookmark so I'll know where to go back to. What did you just hear? The very first version of this new tradition by Omorege in 1970 actually said, yes, there's a man called Ogiso. Yes, he was banished. As a matter of fact, he had banished his own son, Ekaladerhan, which is all true. But let's change it a bit. He didn't die in Ugoton. No, he didn't die in Ugoton. He traveled all the way to Ife. Ife to Benin is about 20 months. That's what this man wrote in his book, Journey from Ife to Benin. But he was able to wander through the forest, forget the snakes and Amotekun, and the Ekun and the lions. He shall have found his way to Ife. When he now got there, he's not what the Oba of Benin just called no, he was Omonoyan. Or like somebody wrote in the comment section, Omoloyan. He was Omonoyan when he got to Ife. When he now got there, they now corrupted his name to rànmíyàn. So much later, they now sent people from Benin to go and call somebody there. We know that he's in Ife. Go and call it for us. Ekaladerhan must be in Ife. When I got there, I said, Ekaladerhan is now known as Omonoyan or rànmíyàn. Oh yeah, let us go back to Benin. That's the first version. But that's not all. Let's go to the second version. Edun Akezua's account differs slightly from Omorege's. In the first place, the delegation from Benin to bring Ekaladerhan, or Kaladerhan according to Akezua, back did not know where the prince was, or the existence of Ife for that matter. They did not know where Ife was. They didn't know where the prince was. They merely came to the kingdom by accident, and by this time, Ekaladerhan was an old man, and therefore unable to undertake the arduous journey back to Benin. Thus, he proposed that the emissaries should take his youngest child, rànmíyàn, away with them. This was agreed to, and it was this rànmíyàn who later bore a son, Eweka, the first Oba of Benin. Omoniyoko, Lo Shora Oni. You know the song by Shino Peters, Omoniyo. Someone wrote Omoniyo in the comment section. Omoniyo Bao. Here's the difference. So we've seen the first part. The first part is that the man was rànmíyàn, and that they came and picked him to make him king because it was the original Ekaladerhan. The Akezua version was that no, he was rànmíyàn quite all right, but he grew old. No, sorry, it wasn't rànmíyàn. He was the Ekaladerhan quite all right, but he grew old in Ife. He now gave birth to a child. He now called that child rànmíyàn. So when they now came from Benin, now said, take my son and go and make him your king. If you notice, they've not called Oduduwa yet, though. Let's continue. The second pair of stories by D.U. Edebiri and Iyare are substantially the same and agree in the main with the first pair about the role of Ekaladerhan. According to Edebiri, the latter wandered in the forest until he came to Ife, where he became prosperous and was made the head of the community. Then he started immediately to establish some structure of kingship, such as he was used to at home. Iyare, by contrast, has Ekaladerhan arriving after his wanderings in the forest at a nameless place whose inhabitants were said to be used to constant riot and vandalism. Contrary to this reputation, however, the prince found the place calm and auspicious for a rest from his wanderings. He therefore told his followers, "Ewanwayihi," that is, this place looks calm, and it was the last word "he" that was polluted to "uhe," and thereafter provided the name for his new abode. Ha. He who he now became Uwe. Berolon. Berolon. Kí ló máa ń pe Berolon ní Arabic náà? I know it's not Okumula. Kí ló máa ń pe jẹ́ láwọn yẹn náà? Ó yẹ káyọ̀ máa Berolon. Irọ́ ẹ̀ pọ̀. Irọ́ ẹ̀ pọ̀. Someone said this story be like Hollywood. Now how then change is Takula. God bless you, Ojinodun. Takula. How can change this? That's how they change the history of Benin. If you notice, there are 4 versions, but let's continue. So, Edebiri says that he established structure of kingship in Ife as he was used to at home. Which home? The structure in Ife was existing before the first Ogiso moved from Ife to Benin, but they are saying now that no, he was wandering. Osono became a vagabond, walking to and fro the earth, eventually found himself in Benin. Now decided to create a structure in Ife like the one he left in Benin. This is the case of the father becoming the son. It's not different from what you are hearing about folks in Oyo as well. It's what happens when people become bigger than themselves. Where were we? What's the next one? Then this one said, Iyare says, Ekaladerhan arrived after his wanderings in the forest at a nameless place. Iyare said that contrary to his reputation, however, the prince found the place calm and auspicious for a rest from his wandering. So he had gone around places, they were fighting, he now found the place was calm. He now said, "Emwawayihi," that is, this place looks calm, and it was the last word "he" that was polluted to "uhe," and thereafter provided the name of his new abode. The sequel to Ekaladerhan settling in Ife is so momentous that it ought to be quoted in full. This is the quote. His deep and perfect knowledge of governmental organization and military logistics, magical power and authoritative utterances, kindly bearing and princely paraphernalia soon won the hearts of the natives of Ife, who not only regarded him with wonders and awe, but thought that he was directly sent to them from heaven to lead them. Prince Ekaladerhan was declared the king and ruler of Ife, by the natives, who looked towards him to establish a stable government and save them from the constant vandalism from their nearer kingdoms. On his installation day as first Oba of Ife, Prince Ekaladerhan exclaimed to his audience in Benin language, "Ikpomosa, Idodua," meaning "I thank God I have chosen the path to greatness." The last word Idodua was polluted to Odudua by the Yorùbás. Is this not madness? Idodua ko Igodua ni Arada. Someone says Zakaba. Where did greater me come from today? You're just giving me fire inside comment section. Well done. Isakaba, Idodua, Ikpomosa, Idodua. Meaning I thank God I have chosen the path to greatness. Have you ever asked yourself, how come they've never had the Dodua festival in Benin? They always had the one of Odudua. Yes, they've never had an Idodua festival in Benin. Some years after the enthronement of Ekaladerhan as the ruler of Ife, Eyare goes on. His father, Owodo, in Benin, still without a male heir, ordered that a search for his son be organized, particularly in the regions to the west, from where news of the famed exploit of a new chief were filtering to Benin. His father's own journey to Ife to persuade him did not avail, except that Ekaladerhan promised that he might consider returning home after his father's death, or he might dispatch one of his sons to take up the throne of Benin. Renewed pressures on Ekaladerhan to return to Benin did not begin immediately after Owodo's death, as he was succeeded by Evian. But when the latter, in his old age, appointed his own son Ogiame to succeed him, there was a renewal of competition for political power, and in an attempt to put an end to this, the elders of the city again dispatched an embassy to Ekaladerhan alias Odua of Ife, urging him to come to Benin and assume the throne. Again he refused, but promised to send one of his sons, Omonoyon, later known as King rànmíyàn of Benin, to become the Oba of Benin. Ekaladerhan died before this could be accomplished, but his instruction that Omonoyon should be sent to Benin were carried out, and this is what they wrote in that funny book, or that funny article in the newspaper. And so Prince Omonoyon concludes Eyare, one of the junior sons of Obagodo of Ife, and the grandson of Oba Owodo of Benin, was later accompanied by courtiers, including Chief Ogiefa, across the river Ovia to his grandfather's throne in Benin. Madam Mosun says, if I may ask, what is their motive? Bella Bini. The motive is to separate themselves. Okay, let me go back just a little bit. Thank you for the question. We'll come back to this book. In 1955, there was a push by the Midwest to have their own state. And in having their own state, they planned to create a new identity for themselves. The idea was that this state, the Midwest, would be led by Benin people. Why? Because they were the majority in that collection of provinces. So the two provinces were the Benin and Delta provinces. So the Benin or the Edo people were more than others. Edo, of course, not just Benin. Edo will have the Ishan, will have folks in Auchi, will have the Benin themselves, and so on and so forth. So they were about 600,000 at the time. In 1957, there was, I know why I'm telling this history, just stay with me. 1957, 58, 57, there was the Willings Commission. 58, the report was published. Now, but the state was not created. Now, in 1963, there was a referendum that eventually led to the creation of the Midwest. Although Benin the Edo people were supposed to be the main people in that place because they had more numbers than any other group in the Midwest, the Igbos had already planned for them. By Igbos, specifically Azikiwe and his NCNC guys, and made sure that even though they were more than others, they were not going to be the ones in charge of power. He made sure that an Igbo man became the premier of the Midwest. The Igbo man's name is Dennis Osadebe. Now, in a bid to say we have moved away from Western region and to say we have our own identity, they were trying to sever ties and change everything that makes them subservient to the Yoruba people. I'll give an example. If you read the Willings Commission report, we'll have another time to discuss it. You see them referring to Ifa and Ogboni as though they were new inventions in Benin, which is dumb, because for many years, a lot of deities and religious artifacts and spirituality of Yoruba people had been imported, so to speak, into Benin. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That was Shango, Olokun, Ayelala, Ogun. That's why if you do any small thing now, Benin people say Ogun, Ogun, they'll call Ogun for you. Everything has already mixed. Ifa as well. For centuries. This is not something that happened because of Nigeria. But they needed to accept that they were no longer under Yoruba people. Now in 37, when the Yoruba Obas had a meeting, Oba of Benin was there. Oba Nkezwa was there in 37. By the 1960s, everything had changed. Of course, it was no longer the king, he had passed on at the time. Everything had changed. By the 1970s that we're talking about, after him, then the third king, Obagodo, and then it was like a need to say we are our own people. And I get where that's coming from. It's just that if you want to rewrite your history, just stay with yourself. Don't rewrite the history of other people while you are writing your own. Just do what you want to do. So it's also what you hear some people say, oh, we are Guinea Empire. It's what you're trying to sever ties and say I am my own Guinea, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because you see, if you begin to say I have nothing to do with those from whom I came, I don't connect me with them, what will eventually happen is this: everybody that came out of you will also begin to cut off. That's what's happening on your now. 14 kings in one town, which is not a big deal because we have many kings in Ife, there are many kings in Ibadan, it has happened in different parts of Yorùbá land. But all those people, there's in reality, look up to the main king of the town. So for instance, all the kings in Ibadan still look up to the Olubadan. But it's not going to be like that in Oyo. It shouldn't be like that. And how did this thing start? Just begin by telling your source that, you're nothing, I'm not connected to you, I'll change your history, I'm your father. You are the father of your grandfather, of your great-grandfather. You are the father of your great-grandfather because you have to prove a point that you are starting a new political dispensation. Here's to a new dispensation. So if you ask, the summary of my answer is political expediency. They were trying to say they were not, just as they were out of the Western region, or they were trying to get out of the Western region, they are also not longer under the shadows of the Yorùbá people. So when this thing is deep. They talked about Ifa, they talked about Ogun, they talked about Ogboni. So they were using Ogboni to take over Yorùbá, or take over Benin. The thing that your people have been doing, and the one they were taking over that was quote unquote taking over Benin was actually reformed Ogboni, not the aborigine. So, to be honest, for the most part, what has caused this, whether in Benin or Oyo, is actually Nigeria. Particularly Benin. The Oyo thing is more ego. For Benin, is more trying to assert like, okay, we are our own people though. They don't give you one fantastic myth of origin. The funny thing is this. We'll get to that later in this conversation. The true myth of origin that Benin people have are directly connected to Ife. It's funny how life works. Now, the funny thing, how do you go back to go and change those myths? I'll quickly read something here, then we'll come back and finish this. We'll continue from here next time. But let's finish some things here. It is clear that as far as the new traditions summarized above are concerned, Rànmíyàn, who was instrumental in founding of the Eweka dynasty in Benin, was not an alien, as given out in the received traditions. Rather, he was Ekaladerhan, that's Omarige, his younger child, Edun Akezua, or one of his sons, Edebiri and Yari. In other words, there was a real and significant link between the era of the Ogisos rulers and that of the Obas in Benin. A link provided through Ekaladerhan, the only heir of Owodo, the last Ogiso. More significantly, two of the new traditions have a novel explanation for the role of Ife and its influence on events in Benin immediately before and during the establishment of the Eweka dynasty. According to these traditions, not only was Rànmíyàn in actual fact not an Ife prince, it could not have been since there was no kingship in place when Ekaladerhan arrived there during the course of his wanderings. Indeed, it was through Ekaladerhan that the place acquired the name of Ife, and it was Ekaladerhan who first established the institution of kingship in Ife. What are they saying here? They are saying basically that they are changing the history to say that either to say that the man who came to rule over them, of course this is retroactive, the man who came to rule over them was actually from them, only moved to Ife and then came back, or he moved to Ife, created the kingship in Ife, then sent his son back. In other words, no matter how you look at it, it was originally their own before it came to you, so that you cannot say you are their father. That's all this Turinchi, that's all it's about. You cannot say a Yoruba man is the father of the Oba of Benin. That's what they're trying to do. They cannot cut it off totally because it's so And you will love this series. We're going to read books. You will see what the Oba of Benin used to do early in the morning. You will pray. There's a particular place you will face. You will pray for the Oni. You will pray for the Alaafin. You will pray for other kings and himself. Someone says they already key reviewed their source. Exactly. Omonoba Nuhe. The thing is, you can't. So the idea basically is that you it's too interwoven. The only thing you can do is to claim that you are the grandfather, or you are the father of your grandfather, or your father of the great grandfather. That kind of nonsense. But that's what people do when they're trying to change history. In order to find out what the current traditions in Benin say about the above problems, that is whether Eweka I, the first Oba of Benin, was in fact a son of rànmíyàn, a prince of Ife, as in the received traditions, son of Ekaladerhan, alias rànmíyàn, the only heir of Obagodo, last of the Ogisos rulers. According to the new accounts, the present writer collected oral traditions in the city in April 1973. My informants, we're going to start from here next time, but let me finish here. My informants included His Highness Akinzua II, the then reigning Oba of Benin, 6 members of the Ihogbe, the worshippers and recorders of departed Obas. I'll tell that again. The worshippers and recorders of departed Obas, including Chief Samson Hihama, their leader, Chief S.E. Emokpae, a descendant of Jogiame, Chief J. Egareva, the leading historian of Benin, Chief Erobiamen or Ehobamian, the Obadagmoyi of Benin, and a few others. In addition, I met a number of young men at informal discussions from which some significant impressions emerged. My most exciting experience was the meeting with the Ihogbe and my interview with the Oba under rather interesting circumstances, which will be described below. In general, all the informants, except the Ihogbe, narrated traditions which confirmed the substance of the received traditions. Most of the members of the Ihogbe whom I interviewed were young men, and they had apparently agreed beforehand on the testimony which their leader, the Hihama, should present. He was, however, occasionally interrupted during the course of his story, whose summary is as follows. During the reign of Ogiso Owodo, his only heir, Ekaladerhan, was exiled from Benin City. He wandered in the forest until he came to Ife, where he was made a king on account of his generosity of Mr. Tortoise. Later discovered this prince at Ife, where he had become very prosperous, and took reports of this to Benin. An invasion of Ife was mounted by Ekaladerhan, succeeded in beating it back. Nevertheless, he invited his father Owodo to join him at Ife. On to change history, this is a 5th version, but this one is coming from the young men in the palace, not the older ones. The older ones had the same story from the elders. These young ones have been influenced by newspaper reports. They now put a twist to it as well. So it says here that he invited his father Owodo to join him at Ife, and the Ogiso accordingly emigrated from Benin to spend the rest of his days with his son. The name Ife itself was derived from Ekaladerhan's phrase, Ilé Ifẹ, and it means I run to freedom. Hele. Meanwhile, Ogiso Owodo's vacation of his throne through his emigration to Ife had led to the assumption of power by Evian, whose regime began the Republican period of Benin's history. Eventually, the Benin notables decided to send a delegation to Ife to recall Ekaladerhan to Benin throne. He, however, refused, but sent his son rànmíyàn, who came to Benin all by himself, without being accompanied by any courtiers. At Benin, rànmíyàn was soon disgusted by the fact that the people were already spying on him, especially whenever he was eating. He therefore decided to leave Benin for home in Ife. At Ego village, he found a beautiful maiden, a slave named Eremwide, with whom he had an affair, assuring her that she would bear a male child who would become king. rànmíyàn then continued his journey to Ife, while Eremwide subsequently became pregnant. When the pregnancy developed, messages were sent to Ife, and rànmíyàn's second brother, by name Hihama, was dispatched to Benin, accompanied by 2 other brothers, Iletem and Ilegema, to take care of Eremwide. This explains, according to the informant, the Ihama's close relation with the Oba of Benin. Rànmíyàn's son was later born and he became Eweka the first. All of this is absolute nonsense. The above testimony, apart from the introducing the mythical element of Mr. Tortoise, carrying the story of Ekaladerhan's prosperity of Ife to Benin, as well as the invasion of Ife from Benin and Owodo's apparent voluntary emigration from the city, agrees in the main with the stories of the new traditions. It corroborates it. You know what, let's just stop here for now. If you notice, he mentioned Obakezwa, he mentioned the Ogbes, he mentioned the Eweka and some other chiefs. Eweka also had to talk to the Ogbes in his own time, 40 years prior. They didn't talk about Tortoise. Tortoise, Ijapa, took the story of the wealth of a man from Ife to Benin. Wow. What have we learned so far? We have learned that there is a connection between Ife and Benin. We have learned that there is something called received tradition, and is what the Benin people believe themselves. If you notice, I've not quoted anything that Yorùbá people say about Benin, and that's because if you want to learn about the people, you listen to them. But go as far back as possible, because be like say people they change history every market day. So if you want to go as far back as possible, you have to go to Talbot. You have to, and because he received the tradition, you have to go to H.F. Marshall. You have to go to their own man, Jacob Eweka, whose version of events was not some that he wrote. There was no Mr. Tortoise in his own story. And I want to read again how he got his stuff, where he got the story from, or the history, it's not just story, where he got the history from, and how he, and the work he did in order to preserve that history. Very quickly. It says here, the history was collected from the following authorities: Iogbe, the worshippers and recorders of the departed Obas; Ogbelaka, the royal bards; Igweronwo, the royal brassmith; Onheosa of Apafa, one of the descendants of the Benin native fathers of the 15th and 16th centuries; Okaeben, Ogiame, Efas, Iyashere, Esama, Erobamoen, and so on, to whom and it says here he owes unbounded thanks. Then it says here that he was grateful to His Highness Akinzwa II, the same one that the writer Akinla went to meet in 1973 in Benin. He's grateful to His Highness Oba Akinzwa, the Oba of Benin, for his unfailing advice and aid by which I was able to complete this work in spite of its many difficulties, and also to the late Oba Eweka II, who very kindly attended to me for over 3 hours on March 15, 1930, for the necessary revision of this work when the original manuscript was read to him by the present Oba, then Ejaken Uselu. What it's saying basically is this: Oba Eweka II was the king. Akinzwa, who became king by 1973, Akinla went to Benin, was the one who was there to read the story to his father Oba Eweka II. So he did not just get this thing from thin air, he got it from the traditions of the people, received traditions. Whatever you hear by Ekaladerhan came much later. I started showing up in 1970, championed by 4 main people: S.B. Omorege, Yare, T.U. Edebiri, and Akinzwa, not the king, another man called Akinzwa. And they came up with all kinds of stories. So much so that by 1973, when Akinla went to Benin to ask them questions, while all the elders were telling the same stories as the received traditions, the younger Iogbe's were repeating what that guy had written in the newspaper. They only spice it up with Ijapa stories and say Mr. Tortoise took message from Kiniko to Kiniko, which makes absolutely no sense. All of that to say that it is true that we are connected. And by the way, the connection is not the people of the land. It's not that the people of Yorùbá, it's not that Yorùbá people are connected to Benin people. No. It's that Yorùbá people are connected to the kings of Benin, particularly Ife, because it's from Ife that Rànmíyàn went to establish the dynasty in Benin, just as he went to Oyo much later. We'll stop here for now. We'll continue from here on Wednesday. We'll be here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Ifẹ time, West African time. We're gonna have a great time together. I hope you get something from this. And if you have other questions, we'll answer all those. So people ask questions about the connection with Owo. There's connection with Owo. There were wars with Owo, and there was a way. There were arrangements that were made between Owo people and Benin people. But I don't want us to get to that yet. I also build the idea. And lastly, this old revision of history is something that you notice, right? When people start getting to a particular level, they want to rewrite it and say, okay, we just came from the skies. We are our own men. It's okay. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?